darkest point, I attempted to end my life. And I can remember it vividly, a beautiful summer's evening in Clapham. You could smell barbecues on the air. I was with all of my mates, again, the guys that owned the bar, a few others. We were drinking, we were laughing, we were telling stories. And you look at that scene, it was the picture of some young lads enjoying life to the fullest. When they all disappeared, I tried to end my life. And one of the lads, a guy called Johnny, Big Johnny is like a basketball mate of mine. He could pick up cars and roll them down the street. He tenderly looked after me, made sure that I received some help, took me to my therapist the next day. But what had happened to me is I'd lost hope and I'd lost the will to go on, right? Now, from that low point, with the help of continued therapy and medical profession, but also
support network,
talking to my friends, being more open about it, reading, realizing I was not alone with this stuff, I kind of learned to manage it. And that's where the intentionality of well-being came in, because I realized that exercise, sleep, connections with that support network, music, all of these things are really important in helping me stay well.
And they don't just happen.
No. I mean, some do kind of organically,
but not consistently.
Not consistently.
Yeah.
But so for me, it's trying to establish, there's this concept we can talk about of non-negotiables. What are the non-negotiables in terms of your well-being? And for me at that time, it was music, it was exercise, it was talking to people, and it was prioritising sleep.
Got you. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing.
Pleasure.
Now, you have met countless people since sharing your story that have had their own challenges with mental health. What has that taught you about stigma in the world today and why it still persists?
I think stigma of mental illness certainly does still exist. Certainly not perfect. And I think there's a really interesting question that is surveyed periodically is, in the workplace, do you feel comfortable sharing a mental health challenge with your line manager? So until we get to 100% on that, there is still a stigma. What I've learned about stigma is there's two sides to it. Social stigma, and I think that's all driven by how mental health has been portrayed over the years. Yes. Lunatic, madhouse, one flew over the cuckoo's nest.
What's seen in the media, the language people use. Yes.
And so, you're perceived as something, a bit of a weirdo. And then there's the self-stigma. Mm-hmm. And I think the self-stigma is pretty powerful, because actually when you do share your mental health challenge, those people that you're fearful of that will judge you negatively actually are very supportive. So for me, to give it a real example, I was in the recruitment world at the time. I had my own business, and I'm thinking, I want to share this story, but how will the clients that I'm working with perceive me if I do that? So I sat one of them down. I remember this conversation vividly. He was a head of tax at one of the accounting firms. I was doing a lot of work for him. I said, look, just so you know, I'm sharing the fact that I've got a mental health challenge on LinkedIn. Just wanted you to know. And he said, one of our other partners is out with depression at the moment. Let me introduce you. And I've experienced a little bit of this myself as well. And so this was a revelation to me. I'm like, I've gone from fear of how I'd be perceived to actually acceptance and understanding and not feeling alone in a business context. And I think that self-stigma is often the thing that holds us back. I think sometimes, rightly so, if you've got a toxic boss who doesn't understand, then you probably don't want to be sharing this stuff. I wouldn't advise people to do so, without considering the consequences or the framework that they're in. But in my experience, pretty much everyone that I've been open with has been supportive, understanding, and it's been a good experience. And I know a lot of people from the InsideOut LeaderBoard that have shared their stories. 99% of them have had a positive experience. I think one or two people said they felt their career had been held back a little bit because of what they'd done. But I think most people that I've spoken to wish that have shared their story a bit earlier. And I think that's all to do with that weightlifting.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because a lot of the times when we think about stigma, generally speaking, it's the external things. So the context in which you share things at work or anywhere else is, obviously it should be taken into account. But actually, I think there's a real nugget there in terms of turning the arrow inwards and thinking about how you manage your relationship to that internal stigma, because ultimately that's something that you're in control of.
And I would be one of those people. I think I benefited from being more open, and I wished I'd felt comfortable doing that earlier in my career, because that weight is heavy. That weight of pretending is heavy, and that's in terms of any aspects of your identity, right? If you can't be yourself, then that takes a lot of energy to maintain and to handle that weight. And I wished I could have relieved myself of it much earlier.
Because the moment that you did that, you started to connect, and with like-minded or people that had similar experiences, and it's kind of snowballed from there by the sounds of it.
And I've met some wonderful people on this journey of being open about mental health, and it's been a very empowering and uplifting 8, 9 years that I've been doing this now.